As Russia prepares to use tactical nuclear weapons, millions of you don't even realize you're going to die in a third world war. Michael Snyder reports, what is it going to take to wake people up? Russia is deploying tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, and there's a lot of talk in the Russian media about using such weapons to bring a quick end to the war in Ukraine. The theory is that once the Russians show that they are willing to use tactical nukes, the US and other Western powers will back off, but that won't be what's happening. Instead of backing off, the Biden administration will respond by using US tactical nuclear weapons against Russian targets in Ukraine. And once both sides have used tactical nukes, it's just a matter of time before the big nukes get used. This war could have been avoided at the negotiating table long before it ever started, but that did not happen. And we could still have a negotiating solution, but at this point both sides are not interested in peace talks at all. We could still have a negotiating solution, but it's not taking place. So we will continue to steamroll down a road that leads to nuclear conflict. Both sides just continue to escalate matters over and over again, and even Vladimir Putin is admitting that this could easily be causing a third world war. Putin, speaking at a meeting with Russia war correspondents in Moscow yesterday, said the United States pretends not to be afraid of an escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, but some people there clearly do not want to take this to a third world war. In the event of a third world war, there will be no winners, including America. But even though Putin realizes where things could be heading, he insists that peace talks are not an option. Let me put my comment here. Remember that before the conflict in Ukraine, Russia started building thousands of underground nuclear shelters. Going back to the article, in fact, he just said that this war will only end by freeing the entire territory of the former Ukraine from the United States and Ukrainian Nazis, he said. We were forced to try to end the war that the West started in 2014 by force of arms, and Russia will end this war by force of arms, freeing the entire territory of the former Ukraine from the United States and Ukrainian Nazis. There are no other options, Putin said. The Ukrainian army of the US and NATO will be defeated no matter what new types of weapons it receives from the West. The more weapons there are, the fewer Ukrainians and what used to be Ukraine will remain, he said. And importantly, he emphasized that direct intervention by NATO's European armies will not change the outcome, but in this case the fire of war will engulf the whole of Europe, and it looks like the US is ready for that too, because Europe is going to be paying for it, of course. Now, did you catch the last part? In this case, the fire of war will engulf the whole of Europe, and it looks like the US is ready for that too. Even if NATO forces directly intervene in Ukraine, Putin says that will not change the outcome. He is not going to back down, and he is not bluffing. Of course, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also completely ruling out peace talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected the prospect of negotiations with Russia counterpart Vladimir Putin. In an interview with Britain's Sky News, which was broadcast Thursday, Zelensky said that Putin does not want negotiations because he doesn't want peace. The Ukrainian leader said he was convinced that Ukraine was just a first step for Putin, who has his eye on other countries, meaning the former Soviet bloc nations, I guess. Now, US leaders have been making similar statements. They keep telling us that we are in it to win, quote unquote, whatever that means. Our politicians have become absolutely obsessed with winning in Ukraine, and they are not going to back down either. But many inside Russia believe that Western leaders are weak and that they can be forced to back down. And as I noted at the beginning of the article, the idea that using tactical nukes will force the US and other Western powers to back off is starting to gain a lot of traction in the Russian media. For example, the following excerpt comes from the article in the Russian media entitled, "By using its nuclear weapons, Russia could save humanity from a global catastrophe." That was authored by Professor Sergei Karaganov, the honorary chairman of Russia's Council on Foreign and Defense Policy. How can that be? Now, we cannot repeat the Ukrainian scenario. For a quarter of a century, we were not listened to. When we warned that NATO enlargement would lead to war, we tried to delay, to negotiate, As a result, we ended up in a serious armed conflict. Now the price of indecision is an order of magnitude higher than it would have been earlier. But what if the present Western leaders refuse to back down? Perhaps they have lost all sense of self-preservation. Then we will have to hit a group of targets in a number of countries to bring those who have lost their senses back to their senses. It's a morally frightening choice. We would be using God's weapon and condemning ourselves to great spiritual loss. But if this is not done, not only may Russia perish, but most likely the whole of human civilization will end. The paragraphs above were not written by some random nutjob. Professor Sergei Karaganov is considered to be one of Russia's top foreign policy experts. But he is dead wrong. If Russia uses tactical nukes in Ukraine, Western leaders will not lose their resolve. Instead, they will use tactical nukes in return. Obviously. We must not go down this road. Unfortunately, people like you and I don't get to make these decisions. The Russians just deployed tactical nukes to Belarus, and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko is warning some of these weapons are, quote, 3 times more powerful than U.S. atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, end quote. His comments come as Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko revealed that his country had started to receive tactical nuclear weapons from its ally Russia. Lukashenko told Russian state TV that his country was receiving weapons, some of which he said were 3 times more powerful than U.S. atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The deployment of tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus is Moscow's first move of such warheads, shorter range, less powerful nuclear weapons that could potentially be used on the battlefield outside Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. When people hear the term tactical nukes, they tend to think of them as relatively small weapons, but that is not the case at all. In fact, if one of those tactical nukes is launched, it will be the largest nuclear weapon used in a war in all of recorded human history. I just wish that both sides would stop escalating the conflict, because once nukes are used, there will be no turning back. Sadly, our leaders just cannot help themselves. Just a few days ago, we learned that the Biden administration is actually planning to send depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine. The Biden administration set to transfer depleted uranium shells to Ukraine for the first time since the Russian invasion began, the Wall Street Journal reported Tuesday. Internal administration debate over the controversial munitions has been ongoing for several months, but an admin official quoted in the Wall Street Journal says at this point there are no major obstacles to sending it, which will be used to equip M1 Abrams tanks provided by Washington. This is a crime against humanity all by itself. If you doubt this, go to Google Images and type in depleted uranium Iraq and look at the pictures that come up. On top of everything else, a former Secretary General of NATO is warning that some European nations, such as Poland, are actually considering sending troops into Ukraine if the alliance as a whole does not take stronger action soon. The former civilian head of NATO alliance is warning that some Eastern European states are prepared to send their soldiers to Ukraine if the bloc does not make significant pledges to Kiev during an upcoming summit. Anders Rasmussen, former NATO Secretary General and current advisor to Ukrainian President Zelensky, is touring Europe and Washington to gauge the level of support Kiev should expect at the Vilnius summit in July. He said, "I think the Poles would seriously consider going in and assemble a coalition of the willing if Ukraine does not get anything in Vilnius," he said. And he said, "We should not underestimate the Polish feelings. The Poles feel that far too long Western Europe did not listen to their warnings against the true Russian mentality." How does this end? It has become clear that neither side is going to back down. And if push comes to shove, the Russians will definitely use nukes. I've been warning about this type of scenario for a long time, but I feel like my warnings fall mostly on deaf ears. If this is not a game. If the small nukes get used, the big ones will get used. And if the big nukes get used, millions of us are going to die. And this is by Michael Snyder. He says, my name is Michael, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters, Commissions Earned. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've also started a brand new Substack newsletter, and I encourage you to subscribe so you won't miss any of the latest updates. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the most important news. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is on End of the American Dream by Michael Snyder. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.